You've done it. You've managed to battle all 8 gym leaders, beat an evil organization, and get through Victory Road. All that awaits you is the Elite Four, the strongest 4 trainers across the land. Their teams are mighty, their Pokemon are the best of their respective types, and their items are the best that money can buy. All you have to do is beat them back to back with the same team. Truly, they are the greatest challenge in any Pokemon game. Unless you're Bruno, who is pretty much a hiker disguised as a black belt. It's no secret that Bruno is a free win in just about every main series game he's in, but it made me wonder, what is the worst possible Elite Four that could exist? What if we made the absolute trashiest of trash? The Trash Four, if you will. And that's going to be what we're talking about today. What is the worst Elite Four team we can create? Alright, but before we get started, let's lay out a couple ground rules. We are not reusing the same trainers over and over again. That means that our man Bruno cannot be the Bruno 4, even though he could easily be on this list in 4 separate iterations. So, we have no Red Bruno with Yellow Bruno with Fire Red Bruno. And Let's Go Bruno. Only one Bruno. That way we actually have a list and not a Bruno pity session. Next, I will be taking into account all sorts of different ways to play. Casual playthroughs, Nuzlocke, solo challenge will be factored into this list. Some Elite Four members are better or worse in certain challenges. For instance, Agatha will not be on this list because switching makes her pretty easy to defeat in a casual or Nuzlocke scenario, but in solo challenges she's kind of a nightmare, combining her not Sand Attack, but Confuse Rays, things like that. Also, the Trolley Elite Four members in general are pretty tough in Elite Four runs, and because of that, they will, for the most part, not be making this list. There'll be maybe an exception or two. And then we need members who are just terrible regardless of how you're playing Pokemon. And then lastly, we're not going to adversely punish members who have less Pokemon than those of other games. This is mostly to apply to Gen 5 and 6 members, but they shouldn't be punished for having less Pokemon because they're probably just bound by the rules of that region, because usually the Elite Four have standard teams throughout all of them. It should be about the quality of their Pokemon and the team that they construct with their region's limits. In addition to that, level will also not be factored. In the later games, you can fight them in any order. In earlier games, they'll generally be lower level if they're first, and I don't want that to affect them. Now, usually they still will be the weaker of the Elite Fours, as you'll get better types as you go on, but I just wanted to make sure that was clear from the get-go. And with that out of the way, let us begin. Our first member will be the man who inspired this list himself, Bruno. In my opinion, he is probably the worst Elite Four member of all time. It doesn't really matter which game he's in, but no matter what, he tends to be a free or the easiest trainer in the game. Looking at this team, we can see a few issues. Mainly the multiple Onix. Onix is one of the absolute worst Pokemon in the game, with an abysmal attack stat, non-existent special defense, or special stats. Creating a Pokemon that deals no damage and can't take a leaf falling on it. He also has 2 of them, 2 rock snakes that don't do anything. Why are they here? At this point, you might be like, well, it has to be some good Pokemon on his team. There's plenty of good rock types in Kanto, like Rhydon. Here's the thing. His specialty isn't listed as rock type. It's not even the ground type. He is the fighting type specialist, and his fighting types are still trash. He has Hitmonlee and Hitmonchan, which are fine enough. They are totally reasonable and the 2 best Pokemon on his team. But His Hitmonchan, on the other hand, is atrocious. He is one of the worst Pokemon in all of the Elite Four, right next to the Onix. And they're all on the same trainer. This fighting Pokemon does not have any fighting type moves in Red and Blue. I know it has counter, that doesn't count. Especially in Red and Blue, it does not count. It has 2 of the elemental punches and Mega Punch, which is a normal move. And you might be saying, well, doesn't that give Hitmonchan the coverage Bruno's team needs to win certain fights? And you could be forgiven for making that mistake. But let me enlighten you. The elemental punches in Gen 1 through 3 are considered special moves in those generations because the type of damage was dependent on the move's type. So, Thunder Punch will deal special damage using that Pokemon's special stat. And let's take a look at the stats for our punching friend. Yikes! That is a special stat of 35, putting it on par with such titans as Pichu and Hoppip. That's right, Hitmonchan does as much damage as a Pokemon that gets blown away in the tiniest of breezes and a literal baby. And you think we are done with Bruno and Hitmonchan? You think we are done with these hikers who have stumbled into a position of power? Oh, no. We're not even close to the final nail in the coffin for our friend. For the game code itself, that's right, the code itself does not consider Bruno good. For those people who do not know, in Generation 1, certain trainers are given extra code to help them take advantage of the type chart. This AI is generally considered good AI. Gym leaders, Elite Four members usually are the ones that have it. There are a few exceptions. Usually those exceptions are going to be trainers who like to spam status moves. Koga and Agatha are 2 that come to mind. And sure, it's debatable on whether or not this AI is actually good for Pokemon or bad for them, because you can get some instances where you're spamming moves, status moves, that don't do anything. Lance and Lorelei would be big examples of this. But Bruno, who does not really have any status moves on his team, doesn't really need to... He doesn't need to worry about that. So he should have this AI, right? The good AI? But he doesn't have it. He does not have it. He is one of 2 Elite Four members to not have it. And one of them is Agatha, who spams Confuse Ray and Sleep moves. So it makes sense that she would spam all those status-y kind of things. Bruno is just a bad trainer, and the game knows it. The game knows it. So even if that Hitmonchan that we were talking about could hit enemies for real, actual damage, he has to roll the dice and hope to God he hits that Gyarados with a Thunder Punch. He has to hope for it. And for all of these reasons, I could go on for even longer, but we will spare our man just a little bit. I could go even further. But this is why he is the worst Elite Four member of all time. And it doesn't matter. I know I was mostly going on with Gen 1, but that is truly his worst iteration. Gen 3, you can talk to pretty much anyone, and they'll tell you that Bruno's free. Bruno, trash. Absolute trash. So, Bruno, bad. He's our first Elite Four member. He is the nice reprieve people will get from this terrible Elite Four. Moving on to our next member, we have Hala from Pokemon Sun and Moon. I know I technically have 2 fighting type members on this list, but these 2 are so bad that I had to have both of them. Plus, Bruno realistically shouldn't count as a typed Elite Four member, like maybe Ground or Rock, because I'm not letting him off the hook for them Onyx. So, we're gonna have this guy be our real fighting member, our Elite Four fighting member, and that's gonna be Hala. And honestly, he's not too bad in terms of his team. He has some pretty good Pokemon, a nice mix of secondary types, so why is he on this list? Simple. Half his Pokemon only have 2 moves. In fact, only one of his Pokemon have 4 moves. Meaning that this man is purposely trying to make his life even harder by cutting his chances to win by half. And it honestly seems like he only knows 2 ways to fight. Attack and cheat. And almost all of his moves are resisted by fairy types. In fact, only 3 of his 13 moves can hit fairy types for neutral damage. That is pathetic. All of his fighting type coverage, or the non-fighting type coverage, majority of it's dark. So he has fighting moves, dark moves. If his Pokemon has 2 types, it'll have the type that Pokemon is, so fighting, and water for his Poliwhirl, or Poliwrath, my bad, for instance. And this man was given this position, right, in context of the story. He was given this position in order to show the rest of the world that Alola is at the same level as them, making people know that Alola has trainers that can compete with the best of them. And this man, Hala, rolls out of bed with a team of Pokemon that haven't even filled out their moveset. Something that most Pokemon trainers accomplish at level 15. Honestly, it's baffling. The fact that the strongest trainers in the region, and one of them doesn't even use all of his move slots. And thankfully, that's going to be it for the fighting type and the fighting type imposters on this list. We can finally move to another Elite Four member and talking about trainers that are actually somewhat relevant and get into why they deserve to be on this list with the rules that we set forth earlier. These 2 are just that bad that they didn't even need to have the rules talked about because they have fundamental issues in terms of battling competitively. Or not even just competitively, just battling. Period. Stop. End there. Alright, these next couple sections are going to be quick. Our next 2 members, seeing as they actually have a lot less insanely wrong to talk about. And we're going to start with Aaron. So Aaron's going to be our 3rd Elite Four member. And he is a trainer that actually can give some difficulty to people. Not much, but he can at least attempt. So, the trainers beforehand were so deficient in terms of skill and team building that we didn't need to talk about them too much. With Aaron, we can't really do that. Aaron is close since he has 2 Pokemon that are absolute garbage, but he also has some heavy hitters, which we'll get to in a little bit. But he has Dustox and Beautifly, 2 Pokemon that are used for the first or second gym, and then you box them for the rest of time, because they can't really do anything after that. Now, Dustox does have Toxic, so sweeping him in a Nuzlocke or solo challenge can sometimes be tricky, as you might have to cure or equip a Poison Cure Berry, especially in the solo challenge, and then you can boost up for free in order to win the fight. But if you don't have a boosting move, then you don't really have to worry. Like I said, there's 2 threats on his team. In Diamond and Pearl, he has a Heracross and a Drapion, which can sometimes cause issues since they deal a hefty chunk of damage, especially the Heracross. It's got Stab Mega Horn, Stab Close Combat, generally a good Pokemon, so you do have to kind of watch out for that. But the other 3 members are so terrible and don't deal damage that you should be able to either set up or have enough countermeasures to beat the Heracross and Drapion. The fight isn't really that hard. In casual playthroughs, he's a joke. In Nuzlocke, he's pretty much a joke. You can use just about anything to win here. And then in solo challenges, there might be like a few Pokemon that struggle, but Aaron in general isn't that bad. And the reason I have him lower is because while he might have scarier Pokemon than our next entry, he still has the lowest of the low in terms of his first 3 Pokemon, which is Vespiquen, Beautifly, and Dustox. The Vespiquen just doesn't deal any damage. Sure, it's tanky, but you get a million years to do whatever you want in this fight. So, Aaron, our third Elite Four member. And we have our final Elite Four member, the Lance of the group, the Karen, the strongest of the strong in our team of absolute garbage. And our strongest piece of trash is Sydney. Our Dark-type Elite Four member is honestly probably just as strong as Aaron. His team doesn't peak as high as Aaron's, but the reason I did not put him above Aaron is because Aaron allows you to set up for free pretty much, while with Sydney, it's not guaranteed. His Mightyena, which is his lead Pokemon, it has Intimidate and Sand Attack, making solo challenges specifically frustrating. You have to deal with all sorts of trolly trickiness as well. You got Sand Attack, you got Swagger, and when you're not allowed to switch out in these solo runs, it makes life pretty difficult for certain Pokemon. It's not like the worst, it's not undoable, but it is something that is a bit tedious, or not tedious, but it's something you have to plan around, which is more than can be said about Aaron, in my opinion, and that's why he's ahead of Aaron. But if we're not talking about solo runs, Sydney's pretty much a joke. He's in Gen 3s, which is pretty detrimental for his team. Like I was saying in the Bruno section, the type of damage dealt by moves is dependent on that move's type. So for dark types, it would be a special move using that Pokemon's special stat. And if you look at Sydney's team real quick, there are no special attackers here. We got Cacturn, whose attack is actually equal to special attack, so it can do either or. And then we got a bunch of Pokemon that have a useless attack stat that doesn't really do anything. And when you combine that with his lackluster moves, you find a Elite Four member that can't really do the damage. So let's take a look at his strongest move, actually. I believe it is the Needle Arm coming from the Cacturn. You know, the move that was so broken, they removed its ability to deal double damage to Pokemon who used Minimize. Truly, an insane move that needed to be nerfed. Thank God Game Freak saved us from Needle Arm and Generation 4. Truly terrifying. But even then, that move is only base 65 power, Cacturn's slow, it has a bunch of weaknesses. It's not that threatening. Like, Mach Punch is pretty good against it. A bug move, like any bug move, fire. The Cacturn has paper-thin defenses. Literally, a gust of wind probably would do good at anything. This guy's not that threatening. Like, none of his Pokemon do any relevant damage. And in a Nuzlocke, you have a million pivots in the world, or a million Pokemon to pivot to. In a casual run, you're like, that guy's the Elite Four? That guy? So, that's our Lance, the guy who does no damage. And honestly, that seemed to be a running theme on this list. You had one member who could deal damage with Aaron, but you also have an insane low amount of damage with the rest of his team. Truly, truly baffling. So that's my trash 4, the worst Elite Four members I could come up with. I'm not going to go into a big section for the champion because this video is already going to be kind of long, and I don't really want to keep you here for hours on end. So real quick, the champion would be Diantha because of, yeah, that Pokemon that you get right before the Elite Four, and it's pretty easy to obtain in any form or fashion in any run. You can do a couple shenanigans, but like I said, I wouldn't go too much more into that. Let me know if there's anything you would switch around. Am I being too harsh on Bruno? Would you switch out some members for other ones? Do keep in mind the rules that I gave myself for this list, but I would love to hear what your thoughts are in the comments. Maybe you can make a worse one. Maybe you have a different iteration of Bruno to put in the list. If you don't have Bruno, I'm sorry. You're not trying to get the worst of the worst on your team. But thank you guys so much for watching, and maybe I'll make another video. We'll see.